for this special latest panel. It's a bit like in school when we were young, when you arrived early and then the teacher would tell you to sit up front. So you may also ignore me, no problem. It's 6 o'clock, shall we start? Okay guys? Oh, generals, sorry. Welcome everyone, and you're really the people with the most stamina being here at 6 o'clock on the second day of this conference, so really happy that you're all here. And I believe it might be a very interesting panel. It was added to the program at a late stage, but the subject is really interesting. And in his excellent book In Europe, Dutch author Geert Mak describes the summer of 1939 as an onerous period in which Europe still appeared to function normally, while the threat of war kept increasing. People went on holidays, they visited cafes and tried to continue their daily lives, yet fear about the future steadily grew. Mak shows how many Europeans had become accustomed to political tensions and therefore partly denied the seriousness of the situation. According to Mak, Europe was in a kind of waiting room just before the outbreak of the Second World War. We are on historic ground here. In 1940, Romania was still neutral, and in June of that year, all of Europe gathered in the lobby of the Athene Palace Hotel, this hotel, as if nothing were happening. In her book with the same title, Athene Palace, socialite reporter Rosie Waldeck describes the old Romanian dignitaries, the rulers of the new radical right-wing government, the American journalists and diplomats, the desperate French envoy. She stayed here for 7 months and published her book in 1942. Elegantly bored British had their own table here. The young Romanian aristocracy sat at the bar. There were tables for whispering Wehrmacht officers, industrialists, bank directors, while another German table was reserved for Nazis and loud, flamboyant women. Geert obviously didn't want to use the word hookers. There was nothing of tension or excitement in them, nothing to indicate that they stayed up all night staring at their maps and plotting. In 1940, the summer of 1939 lingered on. History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. That's a quote misattributed to Mark Twain, but I believe it's a good quote. With me today in this final panel are former DSACEUR James Everard, former commander of the US Army Europe Ben Hodges, former Chief of Defense and Prime Minister Nicolae, former General José Núñez CDS of Portugal, including your moderator, who is also former. That's a lot of formers. But let's say what they have to say about the very near future. Is the coming summer going to be the last peaceful one, just like the summer of 1939 was the last peaceful one? And any volunteers to start? Then James, you are the volunteer.
Okay, so between 1929 and 1939, Basil Littlehart wrote that the British were ostriches, and when their head was dragged from the sand, their eyes were so bloodshot it prevented clear sight. Defence of the West, it's a very good book to read now, and of course German Defence Minister Boris Pistorius warned us in the summer of 2025 that would be the last peaceful summer before conflict with Russia. And this was a Russia who can see its window of opportunity closing as NATO gains in strength. It's also Russia, I think, that believes it has a force and readiness advantage at the moment and believes the West to be somewhat divided. So I think Pistorius' intent at the time was to shock allies from its complacency. And I think he was right, because Russia is not a crisis that is going to pass. Hence the importance of our support to Ukraine. And of course, this at a time when the US is insisting that Europe stands up and provides for its own conventional defence. And as I think we've discussed in this conference, Europe is not ready. And if we don't make ourselves ready, I think it's going to be the start of a very long European winter. We know our leaders have endorsed, I think, very good plans. The concept for deterrence and defence of Euro-Atlantic area, the family of plans that underpin it, I think is good. It tells us what we need to do. It tells us how to do it across the domains of warfare and in key geographical areas. And can we do this given the cost, given the slow pace of our delivery? Yes, I think we can if we think about it with purpose, and perhaps if we think about it differently. And if Chris Donnelly, US Commander Europe now, was here, I think he would convince you that allies can be more lethal for less cost given the emergence of new technology. That new technology also improves our chances of survivability, which is good. And as you know, NATO is urging allies to substitute old tech for new tech. And we had a discussion in one of the closed panels, what does a modern brigade or division look like? I don't know, but you need to decide. And I personally think even if you were 50% wrong, you're going to be much stronger having created it than you are now. So I just think we need to act. We need to get on with it. Otherwise we are going to face a different winter. And I think being accused of ostracism is not where you want to be. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Ostracism, yeah, nice English word. Struisvogelig in Dutch. Going to the east, Nicolae, do you see the history repeating itself here in the hotel, Athénée Palace Hotel, with even President Zelensky being present here today?
So, first of all, good afternoon, and it's very good to be here together with my very good friends. If I am looking back 10 years ago, it looks like being the same people. The only difference is the lack of uniform we were wearing that time. So I think nobody may predict what's going to happen in June, July, August this year, or not even next year or in the years to come. If the history is repeating, there is these perceptions, and there are a lot of debates regarding this subject, regarding the fact that from time to time we are facing some of the historical cycles. If I remember well, we were discussing, because I mentioned that time 9 years ago, after Russia has annexated Crimea, that time this was one of the subjects, one of the arguments we used to convince our allies that the history may repeat. We share with them our experience with Russia, and we were very clear telling them how many times the Russians invaded Romania, and also we were underlying that what happened since 2008, when we saw the European leaders going to Moscow and coming back, and then, you know, approaching Russia on the same manner in business as usual. It was one of the concerns that we were sharing with our allies, telling them that Russia will not stop. And I don't want to mention all the events, as I said, 2008, 2014, 2015. I'm sure that Ben will remember that he was the Lancom commander that time, and when he came to Romania, I was mentioning him the Syrian Express, if I remember well, when the Russians were using the Black Sea to support their troops in Syria. And I said, Ben, and James as well, I met James a little bit later than 2015, but we were not afraid, we were very realistic, and nobody was able to predict when the Russians will expand their aggression, but that happened. So I don't know what might happen in the future, in the near future or in the mid-future. Nobody predict that. As James mentioned in this book, nobody predict when the black swan will occur. But if I remember well, James, you said we have a black elephant in the room and nobody is recognizing that. So, so it's true. I really like that. I think we have to look to the history, to learn from the history. I think we have to use all our instruments of power, from political instruments to the diplomatic, to the military instruments, to military diplomacy, why not? And to prepare our countries, our alliance, to be able to cope with any kind of event. So, once again, I don't know what might happen. The only thing which I know is that we have the responsibility to be prepared to cope with any kind of event, or included.
Thanks. Let's go a bit to the west. Jose, Portugal was neutral in the Second World War, which was convenient for both the Axis countries and for the Allied countries to have a place like that. Portugal is now thoroughly and completely in NATO. From the southwest of Europe, how are you looking at the situation in 2026?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would greet all of you, the members of the panel and the moderator. I believe that this panel has a happy title because it invites us for a timely, interesting and demanding reflection. Are we facing a strategic warning or a strategic alert? If we try to compare May 1939 with May 2026, there are similarities, but history does not repeat itself mechanically. There are similarities. In 1939 there were aggressions, concessions, rearmament. That's what we are facing today. But in 1939 there was no NATO, there was no European Union, so it's not the same, it's not mechanical. We surely recognize that peace today is under pressure, or we might say at risk. So I believe that the key question is, do our enemies believe that the allies, the Western nations, the ones that have values, strong values, have the political will, the cohesion and the operational readiness to defend peace. The second part of this title, on the subject, the last peaceful summer, invites us to regard if we are facing a stable condition or a fragile pause. Let's see, remember that it's 87 years after 1939. So the problem, in my view, my perspective, is to understand if we are in fact preventing war. The reality is that peace is being eroded externally and internally. Externally, namely, through Russia's aggression and ambitions, and internally, inside NATO, inside European Union, by US strategic demands and some divergences among allies. So the alliance was stronger, revitalized with the invasion of Ukraine, but it also revealed that the war in Ukraine, some weaknesses. There is a clear asymmetry between inside NATO, because the US is retaining the military and the political capabilities in primacy, and Europe is still far from strategic autonomy. So the diagnosis is made. The war has united allies and also exposed the existing dependencies. There is a big gray zone between peace and war. And regarding Portugal, at the time, 1939, our Prime Minister decided and had a very strong strategic decision not to participate in the war, although in some areas of our territories we had to face the war. Thank you, so far.
Thank you very much. I would say we go further west, but we're not. Further west would mean the USA, and as I understood over lunch from James Garofana, there is the greatest of all times executing a strategic master plan, which at my low level as a one-star I'm not able to grasp. Ben, you're living in Germany, so you're in the perfect position to combine your American knowledge and your European knowledge to predict whether 26 is basically 39.
So I like your construct, Hans, about using the 1939 to 2026 to kind of compare the situation. In 1939, no Americans were interested in getting involved in a land war in Europe. Even after Nazi Germany had invaded Poland, and then the following year invaded France, Prime Minister Churchill, of course, was pleading with President Roosevelt, we need your help, but there was no support, no interest in the United States. Most Americans in 1939 were first, second, or third generation European immigrants, and they were like, we're not going back over there, we left to get away from that. And so there was really no desire. And in 1939, the U.S. Army was number 19 in the world, smaller than the Army of Portugal and only barely larger than the Army of Bulgaria. So we were totally unprepared. Now think about where we are today. Secretary Gates, former CIA director, former Secretary of Defense, most of you know who Secretary Gates is. He said America has a perfect record of getting it wrong at the start of every war we've ever been in. The key has always been how fast could we adjust and get it right. But the problem is a lot of young people get killed in that process. There's huge waste, huge damage. It has already been done before we finally do get it right, if we do get it right. Here we are now in 2026, and at least people are thinking about, okay, Russia probably is going to attack somehow in 3, 4, 5 years. That number's based on different factors. But I think most of those assessments are based on an assumption that Ukraine is going to be defeated, that Ukraine will fail, and then the Russians can turn their attention to the rest of us. And it's also based on the assumption that the United States, that Russia would perceive that the United States was not committed and that the European nations had all talked about it but had not actually done what needed to be done. So that's the danger. And my old friend General Chuka, saying, Prime Minister, you earned it, but it just doesn't sound right. General Chuka is correct. Everything that Russia did in the last 20 years happened after we disarmed, made ourselves weaker. I mean, around 2008 is when the 2 heavy U.S. brigades, where we had tanks and Bradleys, when it was decided we don't need that anymore. And so they all went home. So we had 2 much lighter brigades, that was it, of U.S. Army in Europe. And then the Army made the decision, we don't need Apache helicopters in Europe anymore, but for what? We need those somewhere else. And so the Army made the decision to inactivate our combat aviation brigade. So all of these things are happening, and Russia is mirroring or paralleling our strategic decisions, and UK takes almost all their troops off of the continent, sends them back home. The German Bundeswehr, which used to be the biggest, best army in Europe, was a shell of what it was. The Dutch sold their Leopards to the Finns. So we all were sure that we weren't going to have to do this again. And that's exactly when Russia began to do what they were doing. Georgia, Ukraine, Syria, everything else. So I don't want to belabor this too much, but it's obvious that the Russians make their decisions based on their perception of our readiness, of our willingness to do whatever it takes to deter them from making this terrible decision. Are we in the same situation as in 1939? No, but we're out of ammunition. I mean, how the hell did that happen? We've been watching this war for years, and we're out of ammunition in 2 months? We're not prepared.
Yeah, I was planning to get to you, so there was a connection here. Nicolae.
I would like to add something. So because we are making, or we try to make similarities about what happens in between 1926, 1939, and now here in 2026, we may compare 1939 with 2036, but we are missing something. We are missing the year 1938. And I cannot envision which one of the summits from 2025 could be considered similar to the conference from Munich. So that's my point. And I don't think everything should be related, everything which might happen in 2026 should be related to the Russians' aggression against other territory than Ukraine. Because I think we will not find the answer. When Ben mentioned Winston Churchill, it came in my mind his definition regarding Russia. So if we want to understand Russia, we have to understand Churchill's definitions of Russia. Russia is a riddle wrapped in the mystery inside an enigma. If we will answer this question, so maybe we'll identify what will happen in 2026.
It's great that you opened this can of worms of politicians. Comparison with 38. I bring you peace with honor. What is notable is that the politicians that were in charge during the Second World War were voted out of office straight after the war, both in the US and the UK. So the question is, do we have the right politicians at this time? No volunteers, then José is the volunteer.
I will try to answer on a military basis. I believe we all believe that the diagnosis is done. So the challenge, the main challenge for the alliance will not be a large-scale conventional attack, but rather cyber attacks, hybrid warfare, and so on. And we should look at this area, these Balkans and Black Sea. NATO and Western nations are indispensable here. And how is deterrence working in this area? So are we really preventing war to happen or to be spread out of Ukraine? We must take a look at NATO and European Union and see very thoroughly the steps that must be taken. We must rearm, we must be focused and pay attention to what is the real assessment of the situation currently. The politicians have their responsibilities and the military are here to respond to those responsibilities according to their decisions. Thank you.
Which is the right democratic answer, of course. On the other hand, we're also influencers, we're all influencers, and we have to influence our politicians in this respect. Don't we, James?
Yeah, so I was just going to finish off the quote, because of course the full quote says, it's a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma, but perhaps there is a key. The key is Russian national interest. And his idea being that somewhere you could find the sweet spot around which you could establish some form of detente, so who knows. I think your point about political leaders is very interesting, because this generation of leaders do not have personal experience of war, and I would say if you look at the number of strategic shocks and aftershocks they've faced since 2001, you number about 15. It's been an incredibly difficult time to be a leader. You know, they crave stability, but they haven't got stability. And they find it very difficult to prioritise defence. And that's why I give credit to the US, you know, at the summit, driving this commitment to increase defence spending. And if we can do that, then we have the money to build the capacity that we need to deter Russia. And I think we need the US and the strong allies in the alliance to hold everybody's feet to the fire, including the UK.
It's history is fascinating. In Western Europe, and let's talk about Netherlands, peacetime has become normal. Even during the Cold War, we were preparing. I'm one of the last guys that still is a Cold War veteran, but we didn't expect them. Our teachers did. At Staff College, they were really serious about it, and we went to the motion. We didn't expect it. On the other hand, you have a right on a war every 50 years at least, and maybe even more. And the question is, are we now at a moment in history where the wars that we are experiencing are transitioning wars, where you see the might and the power in the world shift from the US to China, Ben?
Well, of course, we're all anxious to hear what comes out of the President's visit to Beijing. What I have seen over the last few days is a massive effort to lower expectations, that there's not going to be some big thing come out of it. I don't know that. But I think that our politicians, the people that we elect, too many of them are unable or unwilling to speak to us as if we are adults. As if, that we can handle hard facts. We can handle tough information. I live in Frankfurt, Germany. I love living there. But of course, some of you know if complaining was an Olympic sport, the Germans would take gold, silver, and bronze. But the Germans also are very practical. I mean, I heard when Germany weaned itself off of Russian gas, there was a lot of people saying, oh my God, Oma's going to freeze in her apartment, and these things. But after a few months, Germany had extra gas. They got serious about it. So I think that if our political leaders would speak to us about the threat, most people would actually say, okay, let's do what we have to do. These gray zone operations, some people call them hybrid. I think hybrid is not a useful word. Hybrid, I think of a hybrid car. That's kind of cute. That does not generate urgency. But gray zone operations, we are very, very vulnerable to the disinformation that is out there. I was in a conversation just a few years ago with a German professor. My wife is a doctor, by the way, so I know that Germans are very particular about titles. And this guy was a professor, doctor. I mean, a long title. And he said, come on, Ben, why do you care so much about Crimea? It's always been Russian. Now, that was a widely held belief. And so if our political leaders can't get us to understand the threat and what needs to be done about it, we are still, too many nations, including here, still treat these Russian drones that are flying through airspace as a crime scene. That you got to have absolute proof that it was a Russian that did it, or that damaged a railroad, or some other thing. Instead of saying, okay, of course these are Russians that are doing it. Maybe it's not to do with a Russian flag, but that's who's doing it. And it's only going to continue until we get serious about inflicting consequences, pain on the Russians for doing this. It's not a court case. This is about protecting your interests. And I think this is where our political leaders could be much more direct and speak to us about, this is not going to provoke the Russians to attack. This is how you make them stop attacking.
Yeah, that's the difficult thing. I get to you, Nicolae. I had a discussion with Ben after the NATO summit. He was in train in the Netherlands, and Ben thought he was under hybrid attack. Which in this case wasn't the case, but at least 20, 30 other things during the NATO summit, they were hybrid attacks. And is it really necessary to know from what direction that attack is coming? I don't think so. I mean, was a Freud quote, a cigar sometimes is just a cigar, you have to defend against things that are happening, and whether they're Russian or German or Dutch makes no difference. Nicolae.
The only thing which I would like to add is that I think it's not the right war to be used to influence. Because I think we don't have to influence the politicians, by politicians understanding the decision makers. So I do really consider that the decision makers should be convinced, once they have taken that position, what is their responsibility. If we look to the current situation, and if we also look to what happened in the history, and Ben was mentioning a couple of facts here, to cope with the war, you won't be prepared in 6 months, in 2 years, neither in 5 years. So this is a continuously process which should be considered one of the first priorities of each politician, each leader. So as Ben mentioned, the gray zone war or hybrid war, because, okay, I think people may make the difference between hybrid car and hybrid war, so let's keep it like that, because if we change, we induce more confusion. So this hybrid war, it's happening every day. Even we are facing a potential conflict or not. So this could be one of the most important responsibilities of each politician. So once again, I don't know who is going to influence the politicians. If you are considering the military sector, they have to do their job and to bring the arguments for the politicians to take the right decision, not to influence them, because...
You have to. I mean, I was the first guy on Twitter in the Netherlands, in the military, with the main aim to also be in that public debate. On the other hand, resilience, a sense of urgency. Is everyone here in the room having that sense of urgency? Do you have an emergency package at home? Yeah, with a emergency radio? Who has an emergency radio? Hands, I want to see hands.
Yeah.
5%. 12 liters of water. You may also count beer and wine. 20%. 500 euros in cash.
Cash, yeah.
You are practitioners. You're here at the security conference, you know, and only 20% is prepared for an emergency. Maybe not even war, but if the electricity isn't running, you won't also have no water. So maybe you have to rethink that. And if the voters, this is not an A-select audience, if the voters don't feel that sense of urgency, will the politicians feel that sense of urgency? But I've got 7.5 minutes, so there is some time for questions, if you'd like. Short ones, concise, and no, I'm not going to give my microphone away. Yeah, you won, this time.
All right. Well, thank you. My name is Karsten Friis from Norway. The title of the panel, The Last Peaceful Summer, isn't the answer to that, how can we make it the last summer of war in Ukraine, as General Hodges pointed to. So my question to the 4 or 5 generals, how can we end the war in Ukraine? Isn't that the solution? 1 minute to answer that.
Okay. Then how can we end the war in Ukraine? And
Step one is make that the objective. Say that we want Ukraine to win the war. Now, there's too many people talking about, we want it to end, or we want Ukraine to be in a good negotiating position. What nonsense. I mean, in 1942, Churchill and Roosevelt decided Germany first. In 1943, they decided unconditional surrender. That was the end state of the war, at a time when there was no reason for optimism by either Great Britain or the United States. But they set a very clear end state. And then you could get industry, you could get the population, you could do all the stuff you had to do. And the U.S. Army, which was number 19 in the world, grew to 8 million people in 4 years. So, but it took getting that objective. So it should be our strategic objective that Ukraine crushes Russia back to the 1991 borders.
And Ben has been consistent in that opinion since the invasion of Ukraine. Jose.
I fully agree with Ben. If something happened like negotiations with Ukraine, it would not be the same. So the war must end with Ukraine prevailing after the war.
Nicolae?
Taking into account that the most powerful diplomacy in the world has at least 2-3 attempts last year and also this year to find a diplomatic solution, and that was not possible. I do believe that we should continue to support Ukraine to cope with this invasion and to not let Russia to win, once Russia will win, then we really have to consider what's going to happen to the other countries.
James?
I agree with Ben. I also think that the technological transfer that is going on between many of our companies and Ukraine, and in reverse, has made us substantially stronger than we were a year ago. That's NATO. It's also good for Ukraine. And so Russia is not in a position to defeat Ukraine now. And so, that's step one in our understanding, and hopefully step two will follow shortly.
Thank you. More questions? Interesting like these. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I give up.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Christian Terhish. I'm a member of the European Parliament. I'm a member of SEDE Committee, the Security and Defense Committee. You were mentioning that somehow you have to influence or persuade the politicians to really understand the situation. And I fully agree with it. So the question that I have to you is, what advice could you give to the national politicians and to the European politicians to really understand the seriousness of the war in Ukraine and what is happening right now around the world? Thank you.
Short sentences. James?
They have to get out on the ground and they have to see it. And they have to see it with a military assistant who then will pester them forever to remind them of what they saw.
Do exercises that are very realistic, where the enemy is free thinking and the outcome of the exercise is not preordained. General Andrzejczak, the former Chief of Defense of Poland, did a big exercise in his first year as Chief of Defense, and in this exercise, the Russians were on the Vistula River like in day 5. They got crushed. And of course, all the politicians in Warsaw went crazy on Andrzejczak. What the hell? How'd that happen? But he needed them to see that if Polish forces were not ready and not integrated with allies, this is what's going to happen. Of course, he took a lot of heat for it, but that's, I think, exercises are a good way to get that attention and educate.
And having your capital almost on the border also helps is probably not the good word to use here. But.
So I will present 2-3 most important events from our history. Let's take World War I, World War II, presenting all the lessons learned from those conflicts. And then I will invite him to visit at least 2-3 defense industry facilities and to make him understanding what really means the relevance of self-defense industry capability to support the war effort.
Jose?
I would give 3 simple advices to politicians. If I could, they would first turn ambiguity with timely decisions and mechanisms for decision, turn commitment into credible readiness and rearmament and credible forces, and finally transform the pressure that exists currently regarding peace into a stronger cohesion. So if we are stronger, if we have determination, if we have resolve, we'll win at the end.
Thank you very much. You just saw Anna coming up to me. Unlike everyone thinks, not George is running the New Strategy Center, but Anna is, because she's the logistician behind the New Strategy Center. And she ordered me to go on for 10 extra minutes until the German ambassador arrived. But, of course, the German ambassador was on time. And what else would you expect from Germans? So happy that I can end this panel with 37, 36 seconds left. George, should we evade the podium, or are you going to end the conference right away? Okay, thank you very much, and a round of applause for our panel.
Dear Hans, dear panelists, thank you very much for this great panel. I want to invite, first of all, because you can see on the screen many partners, and one of them is our academic partner, and I want to invite to the stage the rector of University of Agronomy, my dear friend Sorin Câmpeanu. Please, Sorin, you have the floor. Thank you. Please.
Thank you, George. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, Prime Minister Nicolae CIUCță, my Prime Minister. For me, it's an extremely great honor to be the academic partner as a rector of USAMV Bucharest. It is really a very great honor to be the academic partners. We are together from the fourth edition organized in 2020, September 2020, right? And I honestly admit at the time for me was not possible to imagine so many challenges, so many security challenges in 2020. But for George and for Ionel was possible. George and Ionel are visionaries, are professionals. Thank you for that, George. It is the 10th edition. For me as academic, as professor, 10, it's a very significant number. It's the symbol of the excellence. The new strategic, the Black Sea Balkan and Balkan Security Forum is a symbol of the excellence. And I want to just thank you for that, George. I want to thanks to the main partner, country partner, Germany, and all the partners. Thank you once again, because all the topics discussed today and yesterday are only one major objective, a better and safer world. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Sorin. Our great cooperation. Thank you very much. And now I want to invite to the stage, because you can see Germany, it's our country partner this edition, and I want to invite Ambassador of Germany to Bucharest, Her Excellency Angela Geininger. Angela, please.
Thank you very much, and distinguished guests. Former President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, once said, there are two types of EU member states. Some member states are too small to face the challenges of the globalized world on their own. And the others have not yet realized that they are too small to face the challenges of the global world on their own. And in this spirit, after 2 days of intense and lively discussions, I can say that everyone here at the Black Sea and Balkan Security Forum knows that none of us can tackle the upcoming and the current geopolitical challenges on their own, not in Europe, and especially not here in the Black Sea region. As the German State Secretary at the Federal Foreign Office, Gesa von Geyer, emphasized in his remarks at one of the opening panels yesterday, and I quote, Germany considers the Black Sea region to be one of the most strategically important areas for the future security, stability, and prosperity in Europe. We do know very well what happens in the Black Sea does not stay in the Black Sea. It directly affects our continent and the European Union as a whole, from energy security to trade connectivity to food security and our collective defense architecture, unquote. So the Black Sea has become one of the defining geopolitical regions of our time, and it's put under enormous and constant pressure by Russia's war of aggression. But as we see, Ukraine continues to defend its sovereignty with extraordinary courage, and we will continue to stand by Ukraine. But we will also remain determined in our efforts to jointly increase our own defense and deterrence efforts, whether within NATO, within the EU, or at other security policy formats. However, security is not built by military means alone. Long-term stability also depends on economic connectivity, energy diversification, functioning institutions, academic cooperation, and people-to-people ties. This conference has shown how valuable dialogue across all of these sectors truly is. Security experts cannot work in isolation from economists. Military planners cannot ignore technological transformation. Governments cannot succeed without civil society, research institutions, and the private sector. The last 2 days were a great opportunity to see experts from various backgrounds and nations coming together. And it helps that some of the work has already been done. The European Union published a year ago the first comprehensive European Union Black Sea strategy. By this, we have a framework that combines security, connectivity, economic resilience, energy diversification, infrastructure development, and biodiversity. And now is the time for implementation. If history has taught us a lesson, it is that Europe is strongest when it acts together. Not when it's driven by fear, but by determination, and when it builds a common purpose. Let us therefore end this conference not only with new analysis and fresh insights, but also with renewed commitment. Commitment to cooperation, commitment to European security, unity, and shared responsibility. And on behalf of Germany, I would like to thank all participants and partners. We are very proud to be part of this conference as a partner country. And I think that we have managed together and with this conversation, to go another step in the direction of building a safer, more resilient, and more united Europe. And a special thanks, of course, to the new Strategy Center, to you, George, and your team. I think you have done a wonderful job in bringing so many people together here and organizing this conference, as doing it on a very tight time schedule, but very efficiently. It has been a wonderful experience, I think, for all of us, and thank you so much. All the best to you and your team.
Vielen Dank. Dear friends, thank you very much to all of you for your engagement as speakers, as moderators, as attendees to our 10th edition. Thank you very much to Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of National Defense, to German Embassy, to University of Agriculture. But first of all, I want to express my deeply gratitude to our new Strategy Center team. They have worked a lot during last month to have this great event, and please applaud all our team. Also, thank you very much to our translators and to security. They work also very hard in the last 2 days. And of course to our sponsors. All time is necessary to have good sponsor, great sponsor, general sponsor, first of all, to have this such an event. Part of them are still here. Thank you very much to all of you for sharing with us our vision and helping to have this conference. Thank you very much. I think during these 2 days we demonstrate that Black Sea and Balkans are a strategic continuum. And I think we understand that here in Europe we need our Zeitenwende, our turning point. First of all, to invest more in defense, to invest in our resilience, to invest in our industry. And also, I think it's necessary to understand how we can better cooperate. We need America, we need the United States, but also I think Washington needs Europe. Despite who is temporary the big boss at the White House, the President of the United States. What we need, not to have another Munich conference, not to have another Ribbentrop-Molotov pact, not to put pressure on Ukraine to cede territories. I think it's necessary to hold the line together, Americans and Europeans, to stop Russia, to stop China, because this alliance between North Korea, Iran, China, and Russia, it's working better than Iron Pact in the World War II. And you can see consequences everywhere in the world. But as I mentioned, is need to have peace, but not a fake peace. We need a peace, a real peace. We need a robust peace agreement, not to force Ukraine to accept a humiliation and a shameful peace agreement. I think we need to understand, and especially here in Romania, because we have this debate not in Lisbon, not in Madrid, but few kilometers from the battle line, few kilometers from Ismail, from Odessa, where Russia is bombing every day civilians and critical infrastructure. And it needs to support Ukraine to have a fair peace. And not only to have a peace, but to continue to support Ukraine, because if you support Ukraine, we support our freedom in Europe. And also we need to support Ukraine to liberate their territories, because Kherson is Ukraine, Lugansk is Ukraine, Donetsk is Ukraine, and Crimea is Ukraine. And at the end, I want all of us to understand that it's necessary to continue to work to support them. It's necessary to continue to support our defense industry. Also, we need to continue to try to have a fair transatlantic link and a good relation with the United States, because we invest a lot in these relations with the United States, not only Romania, but on the entire eastern flank, when we as Europeans. And at the end, I want to work together, not only to support Ukraine, to liberate territories, but if you continue to support Ukraine, finally, we can have together a great objective, finally, to make Russia small again. Thank you very much to all of you. Please don't forget, make Russia small again, make Russia small again, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next year in Bucharest and to discuss about Black Sea, about Balkans, about our great cooperation with the United States, together to deter Russia, to stop Russia, and to help Ukraine. Thank you very much to all of you, and see you next year in Bucharest. Thank you very much.